Ladies and gentlemen, theys and thems. Toki, nimi mi li yan kase. Anonimi mi ale li ni yan kase pi akasi linya.
If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you have a basic understanding of Toki Pona. I also want to give a disclaimer that I'm not a religious scholar.
I'm just somebody who happens to enjoy Toki Pona, enjoy religion. Thought that this would be a fun project to combine the two together. Also, one more thing before we get started. Do not debate in the comment section about religion.
That's cringe.
None of you have a monopoly on truth. That's some real. Most people, when they think of God, they immediately revert to their cultural context. Whether you believe in God or not, you're still sort of influenced by the cultural context that you're in. So for example, in the US, Mamewika, for pretty much all of its history, it's been predominantly influenced by Christianity. The US president generally lays his hand on a Bible, take an oath of presidency. Various Protestant movements have occurred in the United States, and roughly 70% of the US population considers itself Christian, with 20% inside of that 70% being Catholic. So regardless if you're a part of the population that considers itself unaffiliated, because you're from the United States, you'd still view God as perhaps a man in the sky with a beard and giving commandments and judgments and all the quirks that come along with those ideas. It only makes sense that the same logic applies to other parts of the world, such as the North African and the Arabs, where they would view God in more of a Islamic lens. The point is, the religions of the world don't really have a homogeneous view of God, and even within those traditions and those religions, there's still a lot of infighting on how they define God and the nature of God and what is God. So being a Toki Ponist, I thought this would be very cool to sort of break down and translate the specific names of God. So most people in Toki Pona will just refer to God as Yan Sewi. Since Toki Pona was made in Canada and most of its resources are translated through English, most of the Toki Ponist community is probably going to be English speakers in some way, which brings in the whole bias of Yan Sewi coming from a Christian context. However, I want to speculate that if Toki Pona was created in, say, ancient Greece, and the commonly accepted form of God or the pantheon was Zeus, sure, you could still use Yan Sewi, or divine person, but the story of Zeus and the story of Jesus, or the Abrahamic God, it's kind of silly to equate them as the same thing. And obviously, the purpose of Toki Pona is to simplify things, so I understand in doing this I'm kind of going against the fundamental principles of Toki Pona, but I'm here to break rules and have fun. So as all things, religion can get very complicated, so I will start with Trinitarian Christianity, where they divide God into three separate parts: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So for the Father, I translate that as Mama Miye Sewi, the Son as Yan Lili Miye Sewi, and then something like Kon Sewi for spirit. However, we can get a little bit more specific on how we define the nature of God depending on what part or what context of the Bible you're actually referring to. For example, with the burning bush story with Abraham, we could say God is more like Kasi Seli Sewi, or the divine burning bush. And since Christians generally think that Jesus is God, Jesus was known to be a healer, a teacher, so we could refer to Jesus or God as Yan Sewi Pi Misikeke in Tawasona, but also Jesus could have just been easily referred to as Yan Yesu. But let's get a little bit more niche with the Gnostic Christians. So the Gnostics believe in two sort of divine entities, the monad and the demiurge. The demiurge is the creator of the material world, and the material world is seen as evil, and the monad is above the demiurge and acts as the absolute God. So the monad is a totality, a monistic view. So we can't really think of this as a person, but more of a concept, something beyond thought and comprehension. I would consider Alesewi as a more appropriate term for this monistic, pantheistic definition of God, such as Spinoza's God. And for the demiurge, since he's an evil material god, we could say something like Yan Sewi Pi Pali Ima Aleike, or divine person that created the evil world. Islam's Allah. It's important to note that Allah just directly translates to God in Arabic, so Christians and Jews who are living in an Arabic-speaking country would still refer to God as Allah. But in the Surah But God is described in the Surah as, say, He is God, the one God, the eternal, the absolute. He has begotten no one, nor is he begotten, nor is there to him equivalent anyone, which I will translate to Toki Pona as Miye li Yan Sewi alle. Yan Sewi li Pali alle Iyan, Yan ala li Pali Iyan Sewi, Yan ale li Sama Iyan Sewi. Muslims were referring to prophets, most commonly the Prophet Muhammad, will end their name with peace be upon them. So I will translate this as Yan Moyame Pona Tawa Ona. The Jewish God is generally referred to as the God of the Israelites, or the God of Moses. Their interpretation is generally similar to the other Abrahamic religions I've already gone over, so I'll just stick to the two phrases I just gave. Yan sewi pi ma isale, or Yan sewi pi yan mose. So Buddhists are generally considered atheistic and voidist because Buddhists generally view defining God as a barrier and getting in the way of escaping samsara, which is their ultimate goal. Samsara being the cycle of rebirth and death. However, because the Buddha is giving such reverence into achieving Buddhahood and escaping the cycle, we'll still include his story. So the Buddha, he started off as a materialistic prince, which I translate to Yan soli lili pi mani in iyo mute. But whenever he was sitting under the tree, meditating until he received enlightenment, we could call this Yan miye li awen I kasi. And after his enlightenment, he could be described as Yan pi yo ale, Yan pi tawe sona sewi, or the person of no possessions, and the person of giving divine knowledge. Hinduism has a very long list of deities that maybe I'll make another video going more in depth on all of them another day. But for today, I'm just going to do the major three: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the sustainer; and Shiva, the destroyer. So Brahma I translate to as Yan sewi pi pali I ale, or divine person who created everything. Vishnu as Yan sewi pi awen I mu ale, the divine person who sustains the material world. And Shiva as Yan sewi pi pakala I mu ale, divine person who destroys the material world. Now to the pagan religions. Joe Gardner's interpretation of Wicca defines God into two parts: the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the god and the goddess, which I would translate to as Yan sewi miye and Yan sewi mile. So similar to the Hindus, the Norse pagans have a very long list of gods and deities that I can go over for hours, but we'll save that for another time. For now, we'll just do some important figures. Odin, the ruler of the gods and the god of war, death, wisdom, and poetry. I translate this as to Yan sewi pi utala moli sona en lipo lili. Ni lawa I Yan sewi mute. Freya, the goddess of love, beauty, fertility, and magic, I translate to Yan sewi mile pi olin Toki Pona tawal Yan lili en tawa sewi. Hel, the goddess of the underworlds and the dead, I translate to as Yan sewi mile pi mu noka I Yan moli. And the fun thing about a lot of pagan gods, there's cross-cultural equivalents to them. So for the example with Odin for the Norse, he could also be translated to Zeus for the Greeks and Jupiter for the Romans. In the same order, Freya is Aphrodite and Venus, and Hel is Hades and Pluto. Now, Satanism. Satanists are put into two categories, either atheistic or theistic Satanists. For atheistic, there's not much I can translate, but for the theist, they generally view Satan as not an evil tormentor, but as a rebel who was fighting against the tyrannical Abrahamic God. So with this, I translate to Yan sewi loye pi utala I Yan sewi ike, or the divine red person who fights the bad divine person. Well, I think that's enough for now, except for one more. Yan sewi pi lipu toki misi keke mosi mu mon tawa sewi enapona sewi Yan sewi. Premis just Megistus.